Hello and welcome to the Art of Teaching the Whole Child in a Pandemic, Cultivating Trauma-Sensitive Practices for Resilience. This is your Module 5P video, Cultivating Predictability with Mindful Focus. So at this point, you are en route to your third out of 4 habits that stick this year during the month of March. After tuning in last week to your video about mindful focus and common ground, you've decided that the predictability strategy of mindful focus is what you'd like to use this month in order to counteract the unpredictability and disconnection that we're facing in the COVID-19 pandemic. Just remembering that predictability is harder for a lot of us right now to establish because of the pandemic. And so it's really important to think that even though we're facing this unprecedented times, there's good research that shows us how to establish predictable check-ins and conversation prompts with students to boost their engagement across all kinds of different learning models, whether we're in person, hybrid, or remote learning. We have some tools at our disposal to help students become more mindful of their focus on their peers in the present moment, as well as their tasks. And both of these strategies are very trauma-sensitive approaches to navigating the tough times that we're in. So our Module 5P objectives are to learn those evidence-based mindful focus routines, to specify a new personalized habit for you to use so that you can use your daily pulse to monitor your own habits and wellness. You'll need about 20 minutes, your clear headspace, your printed or digital journal, looks like this, so that you can do steps 4 through 6. Keep in mind that we're using a habit mindset here. So whichever routine you decide to use, we want to plug that in during the focus pits that you're experiencing with your students. And then try to find that reward of that increased predictability. But we're really trying to focus in on not necessarily just saying I'm going to use it, but when am I going to use it, with who, so that we can build that cue routine reward loop of establishing a habit that's going to be a part of our classroom climate. So as you follow along, I encourage you to use your guided notes, and let's go. So I'm going to show you 3 strategies, and it's ultimately your choice of which one corresponds to the pit that you're experiencing. So whether that's whole group discussion, small group discussion, or independent activities, I'd like you to choose which one works best for your current situation to dig out of those pits and find more peaks of students being focused in the classroom. The first 2 that we're going to talk about are called talk moves. And a talk move is basically a mindful response to a peer, such as agreeing or disagreeing, repeating, revising, or adding on. And there's all kinds of lists that you can find online, but I encourage you to check these out, as thinking about students' ability to respond and be present in the moment is because they have the skills to navigate some of those conversations, whether it's a whole group discussion or a small group discussion. So the first one that we're going to talk about is teacher talk moves. This is when you're guiding whole group discussion and you're trying to get students more engaged with one another and more mindful of how they can respond and have active listening to their peer responses. So this is the way you use this is after one student makes a response, you're going to directly ask another student to use a specific talk move, whether that's agree or disagree. Do you want to add on to this? Can you repeat what was just said? Would you like to revise something that you previously said? This can look a lot of different ways depending on your list of talk moves, but let's tune into a video that helps put this into action.
Talk moves are a way to encourage discourse in the classroom. And the first talk move that I learned was repeating.
That plus that is 80. It's not 20.
Can you explain, Romy, what she just did up there?
What she said was 80 divided by 4 is not 20, so it's not going to be the same as those two, because when you add them up, it's going to be 80.
At first, no one can repeat it because children were used to the teacher called on that person, so I'm going to check out until she calls on me. And then suddenly it was like, whoa, we need to pay attention. And they really started paying attention to each other, and they could finally repeat.
I would like to add something with Jason when Jason said 60, 80.
Another talk move is adding on, where they would listen very carefully to what somebody said, and then they felt that something else needed to be added. So they would say, I'd like to add on to what so-and-so said. Who has an answer that they want to give?
You can't change the divisor, you can only change the dividend.
So what do you think, Jason, about what she said? She said revising our thinking is permission to change our mind once we are confronted with new information.
I think she might be right. So I'm starting to think it's false.
So you're starting to wonder. That talk move is valuable not just in math, but it's so valuable everywhere that when you're confronted with new information, you should change your thinking. You should take what you learn, merge it with what you already know, and then come to a new understanding that it's okay and that it's expected.
All right. So a great example of how we can build this into our classroom. And a key takeaway that I hope you caught on to is that repetition builds focus. So at first, the students were not used to, okay, once someone else is called on, I might get called on too and be included in the conversation. They were tuning each other out. So repeating it over time, repeating these talk moves will eventually build the student's expectation and to anticipate these coming. So it won't have an immediate effect at first, but if we stick with it, we'll see some changes in their focus. A pro tip that I have for you is to post these talk moves so that you can see them. So have a list close to your whiteboard, close to your easel, wherever you teach from, so that you can see them and grab one in the moment after a student's answered to keep the students and to build this as the habit for you. Another pro tip is to use talk moves across hybrid lines. And so when a student answers remotely, then ask someone in person to whether they agree or disagree, or when one kiddo answers in person, ask the remote learner to add on to what was just said. And so this can really help navigate and bridge those gaps across those hybrid lines to help students be engaged in the present moment with each other. All right, the next one that we're going to talk about is small group discussion, having students have talk moves. And so this is basically sentence stems that help students get talking. So we're providing each student with a visual list of those same talk moves that they can use, including the sentence stems for each one. So let's turn into a video to show you what this looks like.
We're trying to build a conversation here that is a community of caring and respect. So look at your talk moves on the table today, and I have a Post-it note here for you. Talk moves are essentially sentence starters that students can use to get themselves into the conversation and to draw other people into the conversation.
By the government, and they just can't figure out what to do.
I taped the talk moves right on the table so that they would be ever present in everyone's mind. Today, I want you to keep track of your talk moves. Every time they used a talk move, they put a check on their sticky note. So if somebody at your table looks like they don't have a talk move check mark yet, invite them into the conversation. How could you do that?
Say like, what do you think?
Definitely. Would you use their name?
Yeah.
All right, so let's see what the students say about this approach.
I pretty much look at the thing every single time to see if there's like something I could say, like a clarifying question. Can you explain more about like why he would get in trouble?
He spray painted something on his rival soccer team's school, and when you ask a person a clarifying question, it's either, oh, I heard you said, or can you repeat what you said, or to add on to.
They help enormously with language learners. They give everybody a platform to jump into a conversation because half the sentence is there for them already. But they also challenge other types of learners who may be accustomed to doing independent work and they need a bridge to collaborate more with a group. It pushes kids out of their comfort zone of social conversations, and it moves them more towards a professional and an academic kind of register.
So as you can see, this is a great technique to help students be actively using and actively listening to each other. A key here is to prompt the active use of the list. You saw the teacher share with them a way that they can check off as they use the talk moves. So a great tip. Another pro tip that I would include is including the students in drafting the list so that they can have some ownership over it. And then keeping in mind during a hybrid lessons that you can post that list in your discussion boards. And so when you're engaging with your remote learners or we're bouncing back and forth between learning models and you have those asynchronous discussion boards, that's another great place to post these talk moves so that you can help that discussion board be more rigorous and more interactive and have the same effect there. And just keep in mind that this is generally a good social emotional skill. So if you're a counselor or psychologist or someone outside of the classroom promoting social emotional learning for students, then use your own talk moves in your own space for your groups, or help work with some of your inclusive students to establish some talk moves, maybe for on an individual level. And does it have to be like a class-wide thing, but it could be an individual level for those reserve students, for the English language learners, for those who might need a little more nudge to be involved in the discussion. These are a great technique to help involve and have an inclusive classroom environment. The third strategy that I'm going to share with you is great for independent activities, and this is called a mindfulness check. And so mindfulness checks are an opportunity that we use to have a timer be a predictable cue for reflection on one's presence in a task. And this can be used across both hybrid and in-person learning models. So what this looks like is having those timed reminders to think about, am I present? Am I mindful of my focus? So what you do is you go to awakeningbell.org to start an ongoing bell. And this website looks like this. So you go to awakeningbell.org, and then you have an opportunity to start a periodic timer. So go off every 5 minutes or whatever you set it to. And then you also have an option to do a random timer. So set it to whatever range you like, maybe between 3 and 5 minutes. And then it'll just keep going off. Every 5 minutes, you'll hear a bell that looks like this. I've adjusted the volume to be low. I recommend toying with that before you get started. But every 5 minutes, it'll go off like this. So it's a great opportunity to have that low ringing bell come in every few minutes, just to be a check on students of where their focus is at. And so you teach the students, when this bell goes off, I want you all to ask, am I present and attentive to the task? And give a thumbs up or thumbs down based on whether they're with the current task. And then you use your existing recognition strategy. So if you have Class Dojo, if you have a clip chart, if you have pom-poms, or if in general you just give out positive praise on occasion, this is a good reminder to you to use that existing strategy, that under the radar behaviors that we talked about before. So you're looking for those engaged moments to praise it and to use those systems. And so they're asking themselves, you're helping empower the students to be mindful, but you're also being mindful of, am I catching those students who are engaged, so that you can build up that 5-to-1 ratio with them. So pro tip that I want to share with you is to anticipate this to be awkward at first. I've worked with many teachers who've used this, and they said at first it was very awkward, but then it just really took off. And a hybrid tip that I'd share with you is to praise one in person and one remote learner. Maybe if you're doing a synchronous independent activity of some kind where you want to establish this bell, then you can always praise across both and just have a mindset of, I'm going to give one remote and one in person. I'm sure you're questioning, what about the dishonesty that might happen where a student is off task, but they're giving me a thumbs up and they're like, I'm doing great. Don't worry. Take a deep breath. It just shows you their understanding. It might show you that they genuinely think that they're on task, maybe. And that's a good conversation starter with them to figure out, like, how do I make sure it's clear what my expectations are? And how do I communicate to you what I expect from you? And then it also continues to prompt them. Just keep in mind that even when we're not necessarily getting the biggest honesty from them, the most accuracy, research shows that this is still an effective way to prompt the students to remind themselves to stay on task and stay with whatever activity you've been given to them. And then consider private ratings if you have to. Maybe the students don't do a public thumbs up or thumbs down where they're pressured to be thinking they're on task, but you do a private rating where the students give pluses and minuses on a card of some kind, or just on a Post-it note. But this is a great technique to help boost mindfulness in the classroom. And one of the teachers that I've worked with doing this, a high school math teacher, actually said, with not much faith and not high expectations, I tried this in my hardest, most difficult class I've ever had. Best class I have had all year. I did not say one word to them about being off task. And one of my worst offenders did more work than ever. So at this point, hopefully you've learned enough to make your choice about which strategy you want to commit to. Is it teacher talk moves, student talk moves, or mindfulness check? Which one is it for you to fill in your specific pits right now? Thinking about, now that you've identified that strategy, when are you going to use it? Who are you going to use it with, so that you can build more predictability in your classroom? And then keep in mind the stick with it steps that we've shared. So if you want to really stick with this, be sure to stack it onto an existing habit, make it quick, make it simple. Don't bite off more than you can chew, and keep it fun. Just keep it fun and pair it with a treat and use the strategy. Treat yourself after you've used it. So maybe for you, it's after noticing some students are unfocused during whole group discussion, you're going to use a talk move after each student's response using that list printed at your desk. And so you notice that students are focusing as they see their involvement increasing, that they're expected to be more involved. Maybe it's after you anticipate many students to be silent during small group conversation. So you're going to direct those students to mark tallies on their talk move list as they use the sentence stems. And notice that students are being more focused as they have more reliable conversations with their peers. Maybe it's after drifting focus during an independent activity. You see students kind of drifting in where they're at. You're going to start that random mindfulness bell to cue them and you to notice and celebrate your focus during that time. And notice that they're having more predictable check-ins on their focus. So see your journal for more help if you'd like to see these more clearly and see your options for you. And I look forward to your next steps of sharing what's your takeaway from this video and what's going to be your personal habit plan. I can't wait to hear from you how you're going to make it stick this month with this strategy of building more mindful focus. And so as we move into this remainder of the month, be sure to use your daily pulse to keep a pulse on how you're using that mindful focus strategy and how you're sticking with it. If you need any help, do not hesitate to email me or book an appointment for office hours. I look forward to hearing from you about how you're going to build more mindful focus in your classroom.